Hello and welcome to Tea Time with the Word, your daily reflections for Saturday after Ash Wednesday. And today we shall deal with the theme of spiritual blindness, a theme that is quite common in today's world, wherein it is quite easy to identify the faults in others, but difficult to look at what are our own faults. But before we delve into today's theme, let us take a look at the readings of today. The first reading is from the prophet Isaiah, whereas today's gospel is from the gospel according to Luke. Now, as we said earlier, it is quite easy to diagnose vices in other people, but however, exhibiting the same level of scrutiny towards ourselves becomes a bit more difficult. And such is one of the lessons that we can take from today's gospel reading. Clearly, we can see that Jesus is speaking somewhat ironically when he observes that those who are sick need a physician and not those who are well. Now, the reasons for this is that Jesus is speaking these words to the scribes and the Pharisees, to the class of people who considered themselves sacred and viewed themselves spiritually perfect and spiritually above everybody else. At the same time, we see that these were the ones who needed the help the most, because in a way they pointed out the mistakes of others. But today we see that Jesus is accusing them of being guilty of a far more serious sin than those of the tax collectors and the sinners, whom the Pharisees and the scribes are so quick to condemn. Now, what is scary about this whole episode is that the scribes and the Pharisees seem so unaware of their faults, and this is because they have been focusing too much on the others. And as the result of it, they are so naive and innocent about their own faults. Now, probably this could be because they have entered into a habit of doing the same thing over and over again. And as a result of it, they have dulled their conscience, and thus this has given them a sense of pride that they are perfect, that they are doing everything perfectly, and therefore they are quick to judge the faults of others. Now, this is very easy for us to observe and say. For somebody who is a third party observer, it is very easy to observe and tell the other person that they are wrong. But sometimes when it comes to us, it becomes difficult to identify our own faults. Now, this is something worth reflecting on, not on the grounds of scrupulosity or of despair, but rather as an exercise of self-knowledge. Now, through this exercise, we can come to an understanding of our own faults and of our own shortcomings. And as at the beginning of Lent, we said that Lent is a time for us to introspect, to prepare ourselves, so that we can observe our shortcomings, our faults, and grow in these areas. Similarly, it also leads us to have a more deeper conviction that we need Christ, we need Christ's healing touch, we need His healing grace in order to help us in our areas of shortcomings. If we do all this, then as the prophet Isaiah reminds us today, He will renew us with strength, and you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring whose water never fails. At the same time, we see that in the first reading, the prophet Isaiah tells us that God is gracious to those who are helpful towards the others. And then we see in the gospel the call of Levi. Once again, we see that at once he is ready to follow the Lord. And therefore we see that it is always God who takes the first step. We thus have the duty of responding to God's call. And therefore, as we reflect on today's readings, let us reflect on these questions as well. What are the vices in my life which I am least aware of? How can I begin to address those vices which are most rooted in my temperament and which I am therefore least likely to confront? My dear friends, let us take this opportunity to introspect, to prepare ourselves and thus grow in the presence of the Lord. Amen.